All right, welcome back to the second part of my trilogy on why this guy thinks that his definition of God means he has no burden of proof to demonstrate the existence of God. He was in the middle of talking about his chair, and I think he still is, so let's power through that.
So it needs something or somebody that creates this chair for this chair to exist. It's not that intrinsically this chair needs to be. No, it doesn't. It exists if somebody builds it. It doesn't if somebody doesn't build it. Okay?
Yeah. But of course, you can extend that argument not just to that chair, but to pretty much anything that exists.
But of course, you can extend this argument not just to this chair, but to pretty much anything that exists.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Is this table here necessary?
Well, if you go with like a block universe approach, where time doesn't actually flow the way we think it does, it's sort of just another dimension in the universe, and all of the past and all of the future all exists all at once in some big universal structure, just an eternal, unchanging diorama of all time and all space. And if that just is how it is, and if we're willing to go so far as to say that stuff like that never was any other way and really could be no other way, would actually be logically incoherent to be some other way, then yeah, the universe and everything in it is necessary. That table always existed exactly as it is right now. It never won't exist, and it's never changed, because in the block universe, change isn't real. If you're willing to apply this label necessary to objects, then you can easily find a way to apply it to that table. The table doesn't have to be contingent. If your God can be a necessary feature of reality, then so can the table. You just might have to get out of the 13th century mindset to see how. Open your mind to the idea that maybe there are a few other possibilities.
No.
Or we can just simplify it to no, just because you feel like it. Why not?
Is this house necessary? No.
Okay.
Is the street sign necessary? No. Is the city necessary? No.
Yes, I understand. You're saying that observable objects in the universe are not necessary. I can generalize from one or two examples. You don't need to go on so long.
Are the plants necessary? Are the animals necessary? Are we necessary?
I don't think so. But if this necessary property can apply to an object, then it can apply the way I said before. Why not? The block universe thing and everything being necessary is no sillier than the thing you're proposing. It's exactly equivalent. Everything is eternal, it's always been the way it is, and it never will be otherwise. In fact, the funny thing is this kind of comes along with the God thing if the God is, the typical extra-universal, transcendent mind outside of space and time that can see everything all at once, everything that ever happened or will happen. Because that would mean the block universe is what it's seeing. And there's no time where the universe didn't exist because God is outside of time. Time doesn't apply out there. It applies within the universe, not to the universe as a whole, any more than it applies to God. And so God's frozen in time, looking at this eternally existing frozen in time universe, where everything within it and everything that's ever happened within it is as eternal as it itself. Not from the limited, time-flowy perspective of a human, but from the unlimited, non-timey perspective of God. In other words, the true perspective, the omniscient perspective, the most real, most meaningful perspective. Now, of course, you could say, but the universe was created by God, except that there was no time when the universe didn't exist. God doesn't operate in time. Time doesn't apply to this. The universe was not created in any meaningful sense because there's no time for it to be created in. Creation is something that happens. For something to happen, there has to be time for it to happen in. And so, in whatever way God is necessary, whatever that means or however that works, the universe can also be necessary. And so can every one of its features, which means everything that exists within it. These things that exist and always have and always will exist. If it's possible for existence to be a logical necessity, then it's possible that this can be too, and that you and your table and the plants and the animals and the chair are all equally necessary. Maybe there really is no possible world where those things are not there, and maybe it really is broken logic to say the chair doesn't exist.
No.
Or we can just say no. Okay.
Is the universe necessary?
In my example, yes. To be clear, I think the entire example is silly. I just think it's silly in the exact same way that your thing's silly. It's no sillier.
No, it's not necessary.
Okay. How have you determined any of this? Like, look, even if I can come up with examples that counter you on the chair or the table or the plants and the animals, where do you get off making this kind of claim about the universe? What the fuck do you know about the universe? You don't have some great godlike insight the rest of us don't have. Don't even pretend like you know anything about this. You don't know a damn thing about where the universe came from, or how, or what it really is, or how it works, or what's outside of it, or what's before it, or whether it's temporary, or eternal, or contingent, or necessary. And if you say you do, you're either deluding yourself or you're lying. In any case, you're trying to use this to dodge the burden of proof, but all you're doing is stacking up more claims and giving yourself more burden.
No, it's not necessary. Why? Because it's a very specific universe.
Okay, why can't a specific thing be necessary? If this God exists, it's a very specific thing too. It's not just a general God with no properties.
Think about the general laws, the fundamental laws and constants of physics that regulate the universe that we know of.
Okay, I'm thinking about them, and I see no reason why they couldn't be logically necessary if anything can. And you might say, oh, but it can't be necessary that they're specifically this way. They could be a different way. Could they? How do you know? Well, you don't. You have no reason to think that they even could be otherwise. Physicists play around with little bits of math that pretend they're otherwise, but that doesn't mean they can be. It's just yet another unjustified claim you're making about the fundamental nature of reality based on your apparent evaluation of yourself as all-knowing. And of course, I'm not going to accept that. What you say doesn't become true just because you said it. If you want to convince me you have this vast insight into the nature of reality, convince me. That's your burden of proof.
Think about the speed of light. It's very fast, it has a very precise value. Where does that value comes from?
I don't know, maybe it comes from nowhere. Maybe it's just a necessary fact of reality. You know, it just is, because it's logically necessary that it is, and it can be no other way. There's no other way it actually could be.
A necessary thing is a thing that needs to be because it's logically impossible that it does not exist. It cannot not exist. These logical statements are true independently of anything else. And being necessary, okay, they just exist, okay?
You've opened up this can of worms. You've presented this as a possibility for how something can be. So now I can apply it to stuff just the same way you can. You have no justification for assuming that the things you want to be necessary are necessary and everything else isn't. I think all of this is very silly. I don't think this is a satisfactory answer at all. But I'm not playing my game anymore. I'm playing yours. And yours leads to silly stuff like this.
There's nothing special or necessary about the value.
How do you know?
The speed of light doesn't necessarily have to be that value.
Maybe it does. Maybe there's something about reality that you're not aware of that means that it's entirely logically incoherent for that value to be anything else. How can you claim to know so much about reality that you know that that's not true? Well, massive mind-boggling arrogance, that's how. And, you know, if we're talking about things about reality that are necessarily as they are and could not be otherwise, logically speaking, I think the speed of light, or in other words, the speed of causation within reality, might be a pretty good place to start looking. It's one of the better examples of a physical property of the universe that might necessarily be that way. And you just brush it off. You just say, nah, that's obviously not necessary. No explanation needed, no reason needed. Just, nope. Obviously not.
You could go a little bit faster or a little bit slower.
Could you? What do you know about reality that leads you to this conclusion? Fuck all.
Actually, you can think about another universe where the speed of light is a little bit faster or a little bit slower.
Yeah, and I could think about a universe where there's no God and no first cause and no uncaused anything, and where necessity in this sense is just not a property of anything. I'm thinking about that right now. I've been thinking about that this whole video. The fact that I can think about it doesn't make it real, or even possible. Something being conceivable is not the same as it being possible.
And it would be a different universe, but there's nothing that would prevent that universe from existing.
Oh, really? You know everything there is that would prevent that universe from existing, and you know that that set consists of 0 things. Really? You know for an absolute fact, with no possibility that you're wrong, that the speed of light is not a necessary fundamental feature of reality. Bullshit. The dishonesty implicit in that claim is so gross.
Okay?
No, not okay. I don't think you lying and pretending that you're an omniscient being who knows everything about every possible universe is okay. I have no interest in putting up with that.
And you can say this about pretty much any parameter in the universe, any law in the universe, as if any physical law.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. That doesn't make it true, which goes back to why I don't believe you on the God thing, even if you take the God parts out, the intention and the mind and all that. Because all you've done is say it. You just said it's real, and that doesn't make it real.
The gravitational constant, it's super small. The cosmological constant is almost zero, but slightly positive. Why?
I don't know, but you said there can be things for which there is no why, which are just necessarily true and cannot be otherwise, so these can be too. If this is a possible property, well then it's a possible property, and then there no longer needs to be a why. There might be a why, but maybe there just isn't. You already said this is the case with 2 + 2 = 4. You talked as if this is a real aspect of reality that just is how it is because it must be, because it would be logically incoherent not to be, and therefore it cannot be otherwise. With God, without God, doesn't matter. If it's necessarily true, then nothing else matters. It's necessarily true. And for all you know, maybe that's the case with all these other things you mentioned, the speed of light, the gravitational constant, cosmological constant. Why are you suddenly skeptical about these things being necessarily the way they are and not some other way? Just because you don't understand how it would be a logical failure if they changed? Well, there's lots of things you don't understand. So what? Reality doesn't change based on what you do or do not understand. You're so full of yourself that your basic assumption, which I'm not even sure if you realize that you're making, is that if you're not aware of it, it's not real. Well, I'm sorry, but if you want me to think of you in that way, you're gonna have to give me a reason to, and you haven't given me any reasons to in this video.
There's no reason why, okay?
Wait, there's no reason why they are the way they are? Okay, so it's either a brute fact or a necessary fact. It's a weird thing to assert when your point is that they cannot be necessary and they must be changeable. Basically what you were saying before is there has to be a reason why they are the way they are, and now you're saying there isn't a reason why they are the way they are.
The laws of physics of gravitation, okay? Gravitation goes down by the square of the distance. You know, there could be another universe where it goes down by the cubic distance.
Maybe, maybe not. It could also be a requirement of the logical consistency of reality that it's not that way. Now you're telling me what's possible in other universes. You're just saying this as if it's obviously true. Where are you getting this information? Show it to me. Give me a reason to think that you know these things. That your knowledge of reality is so vast that it extends beyond the universe itself. You make this claim. This is your claim. You've made the claim. It's yours to back up. It's not mine to just accept because you claim it. You have the burden. You're trying to relieve yourself of the burden of proof by making 1,000 insane claims, as if that doesn't just horribly compound your problem.
It would be a different universe, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Yeah, it does. There. I said yeah, and you said nuh-uh, so I guess we'll have to settle this like men. Flip a coin.
Okay.
No. You really should stop asking me if it's okay, because it's going to be no every time.
So the universe itself is not necessary.
I want to point out to the audience, I'm not repeating myself, he's repeating himself. I work with what I get.
It's a very specific, particular setup system with some specific parameters that have nothing that are necessary.
See, I mean, if you thought he was going to attempt at any point to justify that claim, of course he wasn't, because you're supposed to just believe it and move on without questioning it. There's nothing here. Nothing. It's just empty air.
And so let's think about this necessary.
Oh, now you're going to start thinking about it.
And unnecessary. If you had things that are not necessary, but that are there, the first question that we ask is, why are they there?
Well, no, you ask that about everything because you don't know what is or isn't necessary, or if that's even a property that applies to anything. These are just words people made up to use in philosophy to talk about little weird hypotheticals they came up with, like, what if there's something that exists, but it's literally logically impossible that it doesn't exist? What are the implications of this? To try to take that out of philosophical thought experiments and move it into actual reality is foolishness. There's no indication that this is something that can apply to an object, or to a property of objects, like the physical nature of the universe. You're trying to treat word games as if they mean something real outside the game. And this is very different than things like logical reasoning, where you can apply logical reasoning even using words, and verify your results against reality in some way. You can check that this abstract symbolic reasoning that you're doing, this thinking process that you're undertaking, can lead to tangible results. It accurately reflects some kind of irregularity in the universe. That's not the case with this necessary contingent stuff. It seems to me that this stuff is pure mental masturbation with no applicability to reality at all. And I become more convinced of this when I see people apply it in the way that you just did, where you're just cherry-picking things that you want to be necessary and things that you want not to be necessary and saying that one's necessary, that one's not. I see it as an interesting thing to play around with. See what happens if you apply this to things you're talking about. What does that mean? Where does that lead you? We can reach some interesting conclusions about how our ideas interact with each other, but I don't see it as telling me anything much useful about the world I actually live in. It's kind of like asking what happens when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force. Well, there's some level of interest to that question, but immovable objects and unstoppable forces don't appear to actually be things with external reality. You can define whatever you want as being immovable or unstoppable, but that doesn't actually make it so. That doesn't take it beyond the realm of imagination.
Okay, let me give you an example.
You give way too many examples. That last part took so long because you just kept giving example after example after example and wouldn't stop. If you want to give examples, please give like 1 or 2 or maybe even 3, but end it there. Have some mercy.
If you walk in the desert, of the Sahara in North Africa.
I did not expect the Sahara Desert. I have no clue where this is going. I can't decide if that's good or bad.
And all of a sudden you walk and walk and walk, and there's only sand, 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 sand. And all of a sudden you find a pyramid.
So there's a pyramid in the desert. And this is an example of us asking, why is the thing there? So are you just going to tell me, hey, if you find a pyramid, you're going to ask why there's a pyramid there? Are we really spending this time just for that? If so, this is utterly deranged.
Okay, one of these pyramids in Egypt, right?
Oh, the pyramids of Egypt. Oh, I thought you were talking about the Great Pyramids of Sudan.
Okay.
The
natural question to ask is...
why are the pyramids there?
Okay.
The
natural question to ask is, is this something necessary that needs to be there?
No, it is not. That is not the question that you said we were asking. That is not what you said this was an example of. Listen, I'll play it back.
The first question that we ask is, why are they there?
See, so why are you saying our first question now is it necessary? That's not what the example's supposed to be for. Oh my god, this is annoying.
No, because otherwise it would be there also in another part of the desert. Why here?
Because that's where it's necessary to be. I don't fucking know. If we're just making stuff up, I can make stuff up too. Any of my made-up answers are going to be just as valid as yours.
Why right here? Right?
There is no why. It's a necessary requirement of logic that it's there, and nowhere else. You can't ask why the necessary thing is how it is. It's necessary that it is how it is. There's no why possible. The closest you get is it must be this way. Just 'cause. It has to. If there's a why, then it's not necessary. That means it was caused by something else, and therefore it's not necessary in this sense. You've got this completely backwards. You're talking as if necessary things require some explanation for why they are how they are, and the contingent ones don't. That's entirely the wrong way around.
And so the natural conclusion is, well, they're here because somebody built them here, right?
Yeah, that would be my natural conclusion. That's my understanding of how buildings are built. It's an inference from experience. My experience also says that there don't appear to be any logically necessary objects, or beings, or entities, or properties, or what have you. That there don't appear to be any first causes for things, that nothing appears to be uncaused. Everything you're saying about this God of yours goes completely against everything that I understand. All of my experience, all of my understanding of reality. And you're asking me to toss all that out, to dump it in the garbage, to assume something that goes against all my understanding because you said so. Well, if I'm going to do that, if that's reasonable, then it's equally reasonable for me to assume that this pyramid exists for reasons beyond my understanding, that go completely against all of my experience dealing with reality, and think, hey, okay, maybe this pyramid is like the center point of reality itself. This pile of rocks being in this location is the one logically necessary thing that grounds everything else around it. There is no possibility that this could have ever been anywhere else. The entire universe revolves around this building. How is it unreasonable, based on what you're asking me to do? Based on the way you're approaching this question, where the answer to why anything is the way it is or how anything is just, it's however you feel like. Well, it's not unreasonable under those conditions. It's as reasonable as anything you're doing.
That's obvious. Okay?
Ah, yes, the only justification for anything in this entire video so far. It's obvious, okay? Yeah, I agree it's obvious. In my worldview, it is obvious. But in the worldview you're trying to get me to accept, it can't be. The way you operate and the way you expect me to operate destroys any possibility of that.
So an unnecessary thing exists. Once I observe that an unnecessary thing exists, the logical conclusion, the obvious conclusion is it exists because it had a cause. Somebody built it. Okay.
Okay, how are we determining that this pyramid is unnecessary? Because we've seen other buildings and therefore we think this pyramid might have been built? Well, yeah, but I've seen everything around me having a physical cause, and you're asking me to throw out the idea that the universe has one too. You're asking me to toss out this type of inference, to break the pattern, to deny my understanding, and to wedge some logically necessary uncaused thing in there, where my current understanding would lead me to think that it probably doesn't belong. So we can't take that approach with this pyramid. We can't say, well, I've seen other buildings being built, and therefore this pyramid also was probably built. We're supposed to deny inference, deny observation, deny patterns, to insert logical necessity into places where otherwise it would not appear to have a place. So if I do that with this pyramid, if I say this pyramid and its location are logically necessary, you should be happy about that. I'm doing what you want. But for some reason this displeases you. Strange.
It would be totally ridiculous to say, no, I don't believe that anybody built the pyramids.
Why? We're admitting the possibility of things that just necessarily are how they are and could not have possibly been otherwise. There doesn't need to be a why for that. There doesn't need to be a builder for that. It's just a logically necessary pyramid. What's wrong with that? I guess the answer is it's obviously ridiculous. And that would be the end of the objection.
They're there just because they're there. They've always been there, and they will always be there.
Yeah, again, why ridiculous? God's there just because he's there. He's always been there and he will always be there. 2 + 2 is 4 just because it is. It always has been and it always will be. The pyramid's there just because it's there, and it always has been and always will be. If there's an actual problem with this, other than you just don't like me saying this, I'd love to hear it.
Why?
Because it's necessary. That's all the why there is. Just like God. Just like 2 + 2 is 4. There's no further why.
A necessary thing is a thing that needs to be because it's logically impossible that it does not exist. It cannot not exist. So these logical statements are true independently of anything else. And being necessary, okay, they just exist, okay?
There's nothing necessary about that.
Well, nothing that you know anyway. But of course, you're not omniscient.
Why would you think that? It's totally logical, totally unreasonable.
Yes, and that's what I think about your God idea. You understand that it's ridiculous, but only if it's applied to something that you don't like it applying to. You want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to have this concept for your God and nothing else. But I'm not just going to give it to you. Why would I do that? If you want me to give it to you, going back to the point of the video, embrace the burden of proof and convince me.
And I would say that nobody would ever think anything ridiculous like that.
Yeah, I would have said that too before I met theists.
Right?
No, unfortunately not right.
Well, this is exactly what atheists think about the universe.
No, absolutely not. I reject this concept entirely. To me, this is a ridiculous philosophical crutch used to justify theism. Nothing more. You've been proposing it this entire video. It's your idea, and now you're trying to tell me I'm the one putting it forward. Please.
Because if you give this definition to the atheist, that God is the necessary uncaused cause of everything that exists, and you ask them, okay, based on this definition that I made of God.
Yeah, this definition of God that's stripped of everything that makes the concept of God distinct or interesting. This definition of God that'll get theists at your throat more than atheists.
Would you still say that you are atheist, meaning that you don't believe in God?
Yeah, everything you've said is insane. It's an absurd concept that, in the best case, vastly overestimates your own understanding of reality. Even if I didn't find it silly enough to outright reject it, which I do, I definitely would still not accept it. I'm in no way arrogant enough to pretend I have that level of insight into reality. So why are you pretending like atheists think this about the universe? Some might, sure, but you're saying this is a general truth, and that's completely false. This isn't my thing, this is your thing. Don't try to put it on me. I don't accept it. How could I accept it? You refuse the burden of proof to even try to convince me of it. So how am I ever going to believe it?
Well, they probably will keep saying, yes, I don't believe either in this God that you define this way.
Good. Smart.
Okay.
Then
you're going to start arguing back saying, well, okay, let's see what that implies. So basically you're telling me that you do not believe that there is a necessary cause for everything that exists.
Correct. Yeah, I don't believe that necessity as you defined it is something that can apply to an entity. I think you're reifying features of mathematical or logical systems and treating them as if they can be properties of beings. At best, I think it's a category error.
Okay. So you're saying that whatever exists, which is this chair, this table, the city, the street, the animals, us, the universe itself, on one side is totally unnecessary.
Well, at the very least, I think it's probably not necessary in the way you're defining necessary at the moment. Sure.
And I think vast majority of atheists, if not all atheists, will agree that the universe has nothing necessary in it.
Well, again, by your definition, which is that if something is necessary, then it's logically contradictory for it not to exist. Logical necessity. That's what you're talking about, and that's what I'm taking issue with. But no, I think there might be things in the universe that are physically necessary, things that in reality very well might not be able to be any other way. By which I mean that the fundamental nature of reality is such that physics cannot allow for it to be otherwise. That as much as we can talk about what it would be like if it were different, reality is structured in such a way that, in fact, it cannot be different. In the same way that we can talk about what it would be like if suddenly objects on Earth fell up instead, but in reality it seems that that can't happen. Something like the speed of light, the speed of causation, might really be truly fundamental to reality. It might really be something that never can be different in any circumstance, in any other universe or anything. Same with a lot of the other physical constants and physical regularities in the universe, or the existence of the universe itself. I don't know that they are this way. I don't know that they are unchangeable, that they are in this sense necessary, which is a very, very different sense to philosophical necessity and this type of necessity that you were talking about, but oddly much more relevant in this case because you're talking about these things being in fact able to change, and that means they're not necessary, but I sincerely don't know that they are able to change. I've never seen any evidence that they are. I don't think anybody ever has. There's no reason to think they're able to change, even though you assert it so casually, as evidence against their philosophical necessity. So I think this is the much more important point, which is you assert great physical knowledge about the universe that's possessed by nobody else, which I think is worthy of just being rejected on the basis that you don't have a reason to think this, that you can present, other than you just say so.
But at the same time, you're saying that this totally unnecessary thing has no cause.
No? Your example there was of things within the universe, chairs, animals, cities, and you're saying atheists will say these have no cause. Well, that's just not true. Presumably you're aware that that's not true, and I think what happened there is that you were talking about things within the universe, and then you forgot that you were talking about that, and something in your mind switched to, I'm talking about the universe itself. And then you said atheists think the universe doesn't have a cause, which also is not true. Look, I don't know what the cause of the universe is, if anything, if that even means anything. How am I supposed to know that? How am I supposed to form a belief about that, one way or the other? This is so far beyond the realm of any human's understanding that to actually say, I believe this about the origin of the universe is madness. Absolute madness. Now, you can have ideas, and you can say, this one, it makes sense with what we understand about things that we observe in the universe. Okay. Fine. Are you then going to say, I believe that's what actually happened? Well, maybe you are, but I would say you probably shouldn't. I would say your chances of being right aren't that good. Did the universe truly have a starting point? Or is there infinite expansion and contraction? Or some kind of eternal block universe thing? Or whatever. Take your pick. Is there a God that's somehow logically necessary and the first uncaused cause? Hell if I know. I don't know. I'm not interested in pretending I have all the answers. That's not what I'm doing. That's your thing. That's what theists do. Stop projecting. It makes you look silly.
This sounds very much like the example I gave before about the pyramids.
No, it really doesn't sound like that at all. Buildings are things I've witnessed humans building, and so I can infer from my experience that probably this building was also built by humans. Universes are things that I've witnessed, nothing about their origin. At all, ever. And nobody ever has. And therefore, I can infer nothing. from my experience. These are not alike at all, let alone very much alike.
There's something, the universe, that is there, is totally unnecessary. You, atheists, admit that it's totally unnecessary.
No, I don't. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm not making declarations about the nature of the universe or all of reality, because I'm not an arrogant moron. Please stop trying to drag me down into the muck with you.
And still, you refuse to admit that this universe must have a cause.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the universe. I know about some things within the universe, and that's it. That's the limit. If I say anything about the universe must have a cause or must not have a cause or whatever, that's just me dictating to the universe what it is. That's me trying to control reality with my words. There's no reason to think I'm actually right about anything I say on that topic. I'm not interested in trying to sway reality to suit myself with magical incantations. Again, you're the one doing that. You're projecting. You're the one demanding that the universe must be this way, or must be that way, or must have this origin, or that origin, or an origin. You're reaching very firm beliefs about things that you have no access to, no information about, based on nothing but your own personal biases and assumptions. In other words, you're acting on faith. It's religion.
And you say, I don't believe it has a cause.
Well, yeah, I don't have a belief about the origin of the universe, because I'm not religious. I'm not just going to pick a belief and run with it based on nothing. I don't have the information. All I can say is I don't have that information, sorry. It's not that big of a deal. I don't understand why people find this so shocking. You know, waiting for information so that if you believe something, you're probably actually right. What a weird thing to do.
This is exactly that guy that looks at the pyramid and says, I don't believe that anybody built these pyramids.
That is a terrible analogy. I don't know how you think those two things analogously map to each other. I already covered the reasons before.
What?
Yeah, make more shocked faces. That'll probably persuade some idiot out there who you haven't bothered trying to convince with arguments.
It's totally unreasonable.
Yeah, if you make shocked faces and go, that's unreasonable, it's obvious that I'm right, I don't care. That's not an argument. That's not enough for you to meet your burden of proof. That's not enough to convince me. You're just wasting time that could be spent convincing people your claims are true. Okay, if that's what you want to do, fine. Doesn't seem very productive.
So when you give this type of argument, you start triggering some thinking in the atheist mind.
Thoughts, responses, yeah.
They're going to start thinking, well, okay, this argument is going somewhere. Let me see how I can object to this argument.
Well, no, it's not so much that. It's let me see if this argument makes sense, if so, how, and if not, how. The problem with theist arguments is they usually just don't work, and so usually non-theists end up objecting to them.
And of course, they have some objection, and they try to come up with objection to this argument.
I didn't have to try. It was pretty much just dangling right there waiting for me.
And they have different ways of objecting to these arguments. One way is, well, I see what you're saying, but I don't necessarily believe that the universe needs a cause.
Right, intellectual humility. You pretend you know everything about everything, but I don't think I'm going to pretend that about myself.
Actually, I believe that the universe was always there and will always be there and doesn't need any cause to exist.
Okay, less humble. I don't know what the reasons are. I'm not talking to them, but it seems at least worthy of consideration. I don't think you've eliminated that possibility in any meaningful way. Certainly your argument didn't do that. It didn't try to. Your entire justification for anything you said was just, it's obvious and everything else is ridiculous, which doesn't do a lot.
Okay. All right.
Well, it sounds like we're really in agreement about whatever it is we're talking about at the moment. I don't really remember now. I think I need a break. So come on back for the final part. And before you go, if you would, please do give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. And if you like the channel, maybe consider supporting. Just a couple of bucks per video or per month helps a huge amount, and huge thanks to all of my supporters who've already made that choice. Early access, email list, list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.